Hi, welcome to The Path Awakened. I'm your host, James Fox. Today we embark on a new series of videos focusing purely on the concept of what is a spiritual awakening? Why does it happen? What do you experience with an awakening? What are the effects, both short-term and long-term? How do you manage these changes post-awakening in our daily lives of obligations to family and work? Most importantly, how does it help us cope in this sometimes cruel relative world that we live in? So this first video in this series is going to focus again on what is spiritual awakening. We'll look and see if we can define it. We'll look at some of the concepts and how they originated through religion and philosophy. We'll look at maybe a modern interpretation of what a spiritual awakening is, and some key individuals, key figures from the past that report to have experienced an awakening. Then we'll finish with some closing thoughts. So, back to the question, what is a spiritual awakening? The consensus is that it's a profound shift in a person's perception and understanding of themselves and the world around them. It often involves becoming more aware of one's inner self, deeper truths, and a connection to something greater than the material world, whether that's the universe, God, or a higher power. During a spiritual awakening, people may experience feelings of oneness, clarity, inner peace, and detachment from ego-driven desires. It can be triggered by life events like trauma, deep reflection, meditation, or even spontaneously. The process often leads to personal transformation, a reevaluation of values, and a sense of greater purpose or meaning in life. A spiritual awakening has deep roots in religious and philosophical traditions, where it's often seen as a transformative process of enlightenment, self-realization, or a connection with the divine. Across different cultures and belief systems, this experience is interpreted in various ways, but it often revolves around the awakening of consciousness to a higher level of spiritual understanding. I think that pretty much summarizes kind of the traditional thinking, and let's simply refer to this occurrence as we move forward as quote, an awakening. Make it easier for the conversation today. In order to understand the current thinking, let's review the kind of the conceptual origins based on religion and philosophy. First, we'll touch on kind of Hindu philosophy, where spiritual awakening is closely tied to the concept of liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth. The ultimate goal of life is to realize one's true self and its unity with the universal consciousness. This realization is often reached through practices such as meditation or yoga, devotion, and selfless action. Hinduism also refers to the awakening of the kundalini, or a latent spiritual energy coiled at the base of the spine, which when activated leads to profound spiritual insight and enlightenment. In Buddhism, spiritual awakening is referred to as a bodhi, or enlightenment. It is the realization of the true nature of reality, which includes kind of the impermanence of all things, the interconnectedness of all life, and the cessation of suffering. The Buddha's own awakening under the Bodhi tree is kind of the foundational story of Buddhist tradition. Through practices like meditation and mindfulness, individuals seek to reach a state of nirvana, which is the liberation from the cycle of birth and death and the ending of all suffering. In Christian mysticism, an awakening is often understood as a rebirth or awakening to the presence of God within. It may involve a deepening of faith, an intense awareness of God's grace, and a personal relationship with Christ. The Bible speaks of spiritual awakening in terms of being born again, where one undergoes a transformation of heart and mind. Christian mystics like Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross describe stages of spiritual growth such as the dark night of the soul, which leads to a deeper union with God. In Islam, a spiritual awakening is known as the direct knowledge of God through the heart. They believe in purifying the self through prayer, fasting, and other devotional practices in order to attain a closeness with God. The ultimate goal is annihilation of the self, where one loses the ego and attains unity with the divine. Famous Islamic poets describe this process as a journey of love and self-discovery that leads to spiritual awakening. Finally, in Taoism, spiritual awakening involves aligning with the Tao, the fundamental principle that governs the universe. It is the realization of harmony with nature, a life of simplicity, and the cultivation of virtue. Taoist practices such as meditation and Tai Chi aim to harmonize the flow of energy within the body and the surrounding world, leading to a state of spiritual awakening where one lives in accordance with the Tao. Now that we understand the origins in religion, let's take a look at some of the characteristics of an awakening. And 5 specifically kind of jump out. Number 1 is an increased awareness, a heightened sense of awareness of oneself and the world, often accompanied by deep questioning of previously held beliefs and societal norms. The second is the loss of ego or false identity. Spiritual awakenings often involve a diminishing attachment to the ego, or also called the false self, that is driven by kind of material desires, status, individualism. This leads to a greater sense of humility, interconnectedness, and compassion. The third is a connection to the divine or higher power. Many report a direct experience of the divine, feeling as though they're part of something that is much larger than themselves. This can manifest as a feeling of oneness with the universe, or a personal encounter with God or a higher consciousness. Inner peace and contentment is the fourth one, and many report a sense of peace even in the midst of great turmoil. They report that this often follows a spiritual awakening, and it brings an inner knowing that transcends the physical world and kind of its temporary struggles. And finally, the fifth characteristic is purpose and meaning. So it often leads to a reevaluation of one's life's purpose and priorities. Individuals may feel drawn to serve others, live more authentically, or pursue their spiritual path with greater intensity. So what's interesting to me is that modern interpretations reveal that spiritual awakenings can occur outside of traditional religious frameworks. Many people report having an awakening as a result of near-death experiences, where they're surviving trauma or some sort of life-threatening situation. They also report awakenings connected to psychological growth, whether it's therapy, meditation, deep introspection. And while this is a little more controversial, awakenings are reported as after the use of psychotropic substances. So whether it's psychedelics, entheogens, which is recognized in some traditions such as shamanism, but they do report some experience of heightened spiritual awareness after the use of these substances. So in today's kind of spiritual but non-religious movements, awakening is often about transcending the ego, embracing mindfulness and realizing interconnectedness without necessarily ascribing to any particular religious belief. In essence, across kind of different traditions, a spiritual awakening is a transformative process that brings a person closer to the essence of life, or God or the universe, and that often results in kind of a lasting personal and spiritual change. So not just short term, but also long term. Many, as we talked earlier, there are many historical and contemporary figures across kind of the different cultures, religious and belief systems that have claimed to experience a spiritual awakening. These experiences kind of profoundly impacted their lives and teachings. These figures often describe their awakenings as moments of deep insight, clarity, or even divine revelation that led them to a greater understanding of the universe, themselves, and their purpose. Probably the most famous is the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who became known as maybe the most famous figure associated with spiritual awakening, who after years of seeking truth through ascetic practice, as he experienced enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he realized the Four Noble Truths, which form the foundation of Buddhist philosophy and the path to end suffering through detachment from desire, leading to a state called nirvana. His awakening is the basis of Buddhism and continues to inspire millions. Second is Jesus of Nazareth, clearly the central figure of Christianity, often considered to have experienced a profound spiritual awakening during his life, particularly after following his baptism by John the Baptist. During this time, there was a period of temptation in the desert. Is viewed as really kind of a spiritual trial and awakening to his divine mission. Throughout his ministry, Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God and taught spiritual truths, performed miracles, and many Christians see his crucifixion and the resurrection as the ultimate realization of divine truth. A few other noteworthy figures include the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam. He had his own awakening after receiving revelations from the angel Gabriel at the age of 40. These revelations, I think, continued for another 23 years and became the basis of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. His awakening not only kind of transformed his own life, but also led to the creation of the world's largest religion based on submission to the will of God or Allah. A couple of individuals that were Indian sages, Ramana Maharishi in the 20th century, experienced an awakening at the age of 16. I think to me is particularly interesting because he is often cited as an example of how profound inner transformation can occur without any formal spiritual practice. His occurred as part of a near-death experience at the age of 16, where he then realized kind of an intense realization of the self, or the inner divine essence, as he called it. He then left his home and spent the rest of his life, teaching in South India, and really focused on the path of self-inquiry and taught non-dualism. We mentioned Saint Teresa of Avila. We mentioned Saint John of the Cross, both related to Christian mysticism. The latter really focusing on the dark night of the soul, where he described in his writings as the process of spiritual awakening as one of purification, which ultimately leads to the mystical union with the divine. Two final individuals I want to focus on is another Indian yogi, Yogananda. He inspired many with his stories of mystical experiences and insights into the nature of self and the universe. His teachings focused on self-realization, the unity of all religions. Finally, a non-religious figure, Carl Jung. He was known for integrating kind of psychological and spiritual ideas in his work. He was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. He said he experienced a form of awakening, and his encounters really were kind of with the unconscious through dreams and visions and active imagination exercises he would do that led him to develop kind of key concepts that, that we still hear of today, such as collective unconsciousness and archetypes and individuation, or also known as kind of a path to integrating the conscious and unconscious mind, which Jung saw as a form of spiritual awakening. So these individuals, through their kind of profound spiritual experiences, have shaped religious, philosophical, and the spiritual landscapes kind of their times. And their awakenings continue to inspire seekers on their own path to greater awareness and understanding. Modern teachers, have also followed, whether it's Eckhart Tolle, just to name one, but his awakening, reportedly at the age of 29, after deep depression and anxiety, where he realized kind of the nature of the ego and its relationship to suffering. Through his books, his insights focus on mindfulness, living in the present moment, transcending the ego. What I also find compelling is that, and having experienced my own awakening 3 years ago, is that this concept and this experience is much more commonplace. And these days, you don't have to be an enlightened master, kind of with fantastic stories of wandering the desert or committing your life to meditation or contemplation like the yogis did. I think a good perspective is something that I saw on one of the online forums, a while back about I'm kind of quoting, but from Anonymous, but it's spiritual awakening is really fundamentally a human experience of waking up to the realization that the experience is one of a spiritual being. So we kind of go through life thinking that we're a mind occupying a body. It certainly seems like that's the case until we realize the truth that we're just playing that part now, that this earth is a school, so to speak. We are spiritual beings here, in a physical body, learning, growing, developing. So we are actually divine beings on earth. Our stay is very brief, and we probably do it multiple times. And once we have those experiences, we return home, so to speak. So in closing, I just want to kind of wrap this up and maybe share a few final observations. I think it's interesting in this modern day that, most folks with a microphone and connection to the internet have a huge sphere of influence, much more than the enlightened masters of the past, which can be good and bad, as I think we could all agree. I also kind of think, as we look back at the religious context and where some of these concepts originated, were times where the historical religions were much more kind of exclusionary, much more restrictive, not necessarily a great thing. But today, we're shifting toward much more open, much more sense of acceptance in the modern interpretations that we've discussed. So I believe that this profound change or an awakening is really available to everyone, and our ability to embrace this transformative experience is really just a natural part of our evolution. And we need to kind of have that mindset so that we can encourage others, help others, and really know that awakening is not the goal. It's not the end. The end, or the path, is how do you master kind of the art of integration after the awakening, continuing to thrive in our daily lives, loving and supporting our families, meeting our obligations to me, and then, being a productive member of society, serving others. That's that purpose piece we talked about earlier from a characteristic standpoint. So if you're listening to this video, then I would assume that you're you've already either experienced an awakening or you're starting down that path now. You're going to read, or some will tell you that it's a very rare and difficult achievement. But I would argue that you don't have to be, again, an ascended master. You don't have to do heroic, miraculous things to have this experience. You need simple tools and practices. And there is a massive amount of new interest in this topic over the last few years, with more people awakening every day. The widespread availability of this very open and accepting spiritual context and messaging is growing exponentially. And there's a real sense of spiritual change coming. The important point, again, is that an awakening is available to anyone and everyone, and at any moment. There's a real sense of knowing that it's a natural evolutionary process. And that experience is going to unfold differently for everybody, whether it's spontaneous or as it relates to a dark night of the soul from a traumatic past. But ultimately, it remains a goal for us as spiritual beings in this relative world. So as I noted earlier, an awakening does provide a profound change in one's perspective, revealing a deep interconnectedness and the possibility for spiritual healing. And it's an understanding at the end of the day that you know that you are perfect in every way, and you always have been. So rest assured that we at the Path Awakened will do our best to continue to create content on this topic in service of others. We'll see you again very soon. Peace, love, and happiness. Thank you.